going to be freezing.
Oh, it was really cold this morning.
Yeah,
Here.
1 degree.
So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. We might get a few more people showing up, but we'll, in the interest of time, just get going because we got some work to do. So my name is Kayla, and I'm the site manager and community education coordinator at the Compost Education Center. Have any of you been there before?
I bought seeds at the
In the shop there?
no, at the stall thing you had at the front. The little where everyone put their stalls out at the front.
Cool.
Yeah.
At our plant sale? Maybe?
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay, so you've been to the plant sale, and otherwise, no.
We just moved here 10 days ago.
Welcome. Welcome. So I'll start by acknowledging where we are in space, and then I'll share a little bit about the Compost Education Center, and then I'll get into what we're going to be doing today as I stand in front of this huge mound of leaves that Robin has so amazingly collected. So yeah, to acknowledge where we are in space. So yes, we're here, in the neighborhood that is now known as Gonzales. We're quite close to the ocean, but this territory is very much the territory of Lekwungen people. So we're on Coast Salish, unceded Coast Salish territory. Lekwungen land, particularly Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations, have frequented these territories and still live here, and still this is their land. And I'm sure other Coast Salish tribes also, use these lands and use that beach for different life practices. And so, yeah, as myself as a settler and an uninvited guest on these territories, I like to begin workshops in this way to just acknowledge what land we're standing on. And I appreciate that today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be repairing soil, really repairing it and building it so that we can grow plants in it. And Robin is particularly interested in growing some native plants, which I think is fantastic because this landscape would have been covered in a Gary Oak meadow, so in a Quetlal food system, which is the camas bulb. So would have been filled with big old Gary Oak trees, and it was actively stewarded by Coast Salish people. They did prescribed burns, they harvested the bulbs for eating, and it was it was a really functional Quetlal food system, and so it's exciting that there'll be some native plants here that are from that ecosystem, that Gary Oak ecosystem. It's a really precious ecosystem that is very, very unique to this bioregion. So, and at the Compost Education Center, we're forever curious about what our role is in decolonial work and in reconciliation work, and how through reconnecting people to land-based practices like sheet mulching, like building soil, how that can start to build reverence and respect for the land that we're on, and in turn the original peoples whose land that we're on. I've heard lots of people, or I've heard a few people in Coast Salish territory, a few Coast Salish people say that their land is no different than their bodies, and their body is no different from their land. So it's like one and the same, and so if we can respect the land, then that will get us closer to really respecting the Indigenous peoples whose land we're occupying.
I'd just like to say that I used to have an 150-year oak tree, but in 2014 it blew over.
Oh.
So it was the only one, and this whole area that was
Wow.
left.
Yeah.
So I miss it.
I bet you do. Yeah, that would have been hard to see blow down, but I guess it was at the end of its life, huh?
Well, it had been losing big branches like this for several years.
Yeah.
And,
Maybe it was missing its friends, its other old Gary Oak trees, right?
Probably
Yeah.
so.
Aw. And so the Compost Education Center is just a neighborhood over that way, so we're just in Fernwood, and I welcome you all to come see the space. So we're open to the public Wednesdays through Saturdays, 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. And inside our little office, we sell compost bins, we sell garden seeds, we sell composting accessories, and then we have a whole lot of resources that are free and available to the public. So we have fact sheets, which are both available online and hard copy in person at the center. And they're on a whole wide variety of topics, including there's a fact sheet on mulching, and in that mulching fact sheet, it talks about sheet mulching. So that's kind of going to be your handout for this sort of workshop, if you'd like to make reference to different things. But there's fact sheets on basic backyard composting, on rainwater harvesting, on how to keep rats out of your compost bins, on compostable plastics. There's a whole wide variety of fact sheets. So those are available to you both online and in person at the Compost Education Center. We have staff that are there through those days, Wednesdays through Saturdays, to answer composting and gardening questions. And then we have a big demonstration garden. So there's space there. There's gardens that we take care of that are demonstrating different ways to organically grow food, to use permaculture practices in growing plants, and to use conservation-based practices. So there's everything from an aquaponics system to solar panels to rainwater harvesting to a forest garden to annual veggie growing, greenhouse, and it's all packed in this little space. So it's really fun to see, and I encourage you to come stop by. Again, the gate's just open. You're welcome to come in. And then we share space with the Fernwood Community Association's allotment gardens. So that's also really fun to tour through because you can see the different ways that individual plot owners are caring for their veggies and such and whatever they're growing. So that's the Compost Education Center, the sort of demonstration site. We also have schools programs. So if you know of any young ones who are in school, their teachers can hire us to come to their schools, or their school groups can come to us for a site tour or a worm composting workshop or a soil health workshop. So that's all available. And then we have this really active adults program, adult education program. So you're participating in one of those workshops right now. Some are free. And I just want to give a shout out to the Capital Regional District. That's why these workshops are, the core workshops that we offer are free, is because we have some funding from the Capital Regional District to do that. And then there's a whole bunch of other workshops that are $20 or, depending on how you identify, different prices. And so, for example, this afternoon we've got a miso fermenting workshop, and last weekend we had an advanced mushroom growing workshop happening, and in a couple weeks I'm teaching a permaculture basics workshop. Lots of food workshops, lots of gardening workshops, so stay tuned. We're going to be launching our 2022 workshops very shortly, so that you can see all the interesting gardening, foodie workshops we'll have going on next year. Yeah, and then just a little shout out and promo about memberships. So memberships cost $20 if you identify as a student, unwaged, or a senior person, and then they're $25 otherwise. And they get you access to one of our workshops for free, which are normally $20. So it's a pretty sweet deal. It makes a great Christmas gift, and we're coming into that sort of festive season, or a Hanukkah gift, or whatever else you practice, a solstice gift. So yeah, consider becoming a member. It's a really great way to support the work that we do in the world. And then people get a free workshop, which is really nice. And discounts on our compost bins at the center as well. And actually at a couple garden centers too. There's like a lot of benefits to becoming a member, so it's an easy one to plug in promo. Does anybody have any questions about the Compost Ed Center? No. Okay.
Oh, it's actually,
Yeah.
anybody show up. You don't have to be a member.
Anybody can show up. Hey, welcome.
Hi.
You here for the workshop?
Yes.
Right on. I was just sharing a little bit about the Compost Education Center, and then we're going to talk about what we're going to do today, and then we're going to do today. My colleague Jeffrey is just filming for a recording of a workshop that we're going to send to a few online participants. Are you okay with being on camera, or would you prefer not?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Welcome in. And maybe I'll just hear people's names because we're a nice small group. I'm Kayla.
I'm Jeffrey.
Jeffrey's behind the camera. Yumi. Robin. Jane. Colette.
Tella.
Cool. Welcome in, everybody. And tell me your question again. Can anybody come to the site? Was that the question?
Yes. Like it's just open to the public.
It's open to the public. Yeah, so you can just cruise on into the garden, and then our office space is where we sell the seeds and have the fact sheets and the compost bins, so you can just come on in. Wednesdays through Saturdays, though, is when the gate is open.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll come and it'll be locked, and that'll be a bummer. So the CRD, I thanked them, but I also want to thank the City of Victoria because we got some funding through the City of Victoria to install a couple of boulevard gardens to support that practice, and then to also encourage people to support the homeowners with caring for their boulevard gardens. So Robin lives in this house here, and was in a workshop that I did months ago, right?
It was on Zoom.
It was on Zoom, yeah, and I had mentioned that we were going to be, wanting to put 2 boulevard gardens in the Gonzales neighborhood in particular, because the Gonzales neighborhood doesn't technically have a community garden, so this is kind of the city's way of like encouraging more gardening happening in this particular neighborhood. And so, yeah, they gave us some funds to help facilitate boulevard gardens, at least to get installed in this neighborhood. And so, very grateful to the City of Victoria. And also, Robin and I haven't explicitly sorted out our details around how we're going to care for this garden, but Robin will most likely need and desire help. And so we'll be looking for some folks to come and help Robin care for this space and take a little bit of ownership over caring for the plants that will be in this garden. And this is really step one. Step one is building the soil. So that's what we're going to do today. Before I even launch into that, I'm wondering, Robin, if you, because I know you had some ideas about design and what you wanted to see in this garden, just so people can have a little vision in their head about what this garden might transpire to look like.
Oh, okay.
What are some of your thoughts?
Okay, well, since I have the little library here,
Yeah.
I want to have a bench, and I've already got the bench, so I
Yay.
have to get it ready.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, we have a lot of children on this block, so
Yeah.
I would like to have the kids work on stepping stones that would be along the curb as part of it, and yeah, so it'll be native plants with a path through so you can get out of your car. Basically,
Great. Yeah. That's fantastic. I love the idea of having a bench so people can like grab a book, read for a minute, put it back if they're not wanting to take it along. So
the
good.
other thing is, my husband, before he passed away, he had a stroke, and we would go for walks, and there was never any place to sit.
Oh,
So I would
right.
carry a chair with me
Chair,
so he
that you
could
could take
sit.
a break.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the bench too.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And there's a hospital right up at the end, Glengarry.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that go back and forth with wheelchairs.
That's so great. Yeah. So somebody can have a little break if they need it when
Yeah.
they're on their walk. Oh, so amazing. You're going to be on people's regular walking route now because of
Good.
that. Right on. Cool. So that's sort of like a little bit more about the vision. And this is a big boulevard. And you've probably seen through the city that there are plenty of boulevards. And boulevards are technically city property. And in order to grow on them, you need the permission of the adjacent property owner. So if you were a homeowner, you could garden on the boulevard with your own permission. But for myself, as an example, I rent. And so I requested I asked my landlord if I could garden on the boulevard, and he gave me permission, and so I've got a boulevard garden in my place where I rent. So you just need the permission of the adjacent property owner, but it's technically city land, and so it's like in this unique category, which makes it really great for gardening on in many ways. And the City of Victoria has boulevard gardening guidelines, and so they are like, I think it's like 4 or 5 pages, and it basically goes through some of the rule type things that you need to keep in mind when you're gardening on a boulevard in particular. So I'll talk a little bit about boulevard gardening, and then we'll get into the sheet mulching bit. So the boulevard gardening guidelines basically state that you need to, before you dig with any tool, you need to do you need to call the BC1 and just confirm that there's no gas pipes that are underneath or any other electrical or water services that you might interact with. And I did that for my boulevard garden, and there is a gas pipe right down the middle. But honestly, I've never stuck a shovel in my soil because I sheet mulched and then I planted into the sheet mulch. And so maybe every once in a while I use a hand trowel to get a weed out, but I've built up the soil. So it's very rare that if you're using this style of building soil that you'll actually interact with those those utilities, but you still have to go through the formal thing before you dig of doing the BC1 one. You fill out a form online. It's pretty simple. And then there's other rules around boulevard gardening, mostly in terms of height. So you have to be mindful of, like, say if you wanted to plant a fruit tree, you absolutely can, but it has to be a dwarf fruit tree, so it only can get a certain height. And then you also have to be mindful of it going into the sidewalk and obstructing people's walking ability. So, yeah, but besides that, it's pretty
And
Pretty
sight
awesome.
distance when you're backing out.
sight distance when you're backing out. Is that on there too?
I don't know, but I really...
That's something you care about.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, good point. Yeah, and there's a group, a collaboration of a number of different nonprofits that was started during COVID called, the website is Growing Food Together. It's Growing Together is the movement, I guess, of a lot of different organizations, and there's a really fantastic boulevard gardening video on there. So maybe I'll send you some links. Like I'll link you to the fact sheet and I'll link you to that video after this workshop, so that you can take a view of that video if you want. And the person who's in that video is hilarious. He shows up in a costume a couple times during the video and stuff, and he's the lawyer who supported the development of the boulevard gardening guidelines, which is kind of just a cool little anecdote side note. So boulevards are fantastic places to grow, and you can grow on boulevards so long as you have the permission of the adjacent property owner. So, even if you wanted to garden here in Gonzales on somebody else's boulevard, but you lived 5 streets over, you could knock on that person's door and be like, hey, can I garden on your boulevard? And if you had their blessing, you could do that. So it's really neat. It's this sort of incredibly valuable underutilized space, in my opinion. And so I'm grateful that we're doing boulevard gardening today, because I just feel really keenly like these are spaces that could grow a lot of plants. And yes, they're growing grass right now, but the sort of ecological services, or the biological value of having native plants or food plants or dwarf fruit trees growing here is so much more valuable than grass. And this street is actually super, super cool for boulevard gardens. Robin has awesome neighbors that have incredible
There's so
boulevard
many
gardens.
cute ones around
Aren't
here.
there?
I've biked around here before, and there's so many adorable gardens.
There are, yeah. And so there's one right there we can see, and then beyond that there's some beautiful, beautiful gardens that are on the boulevard. And in my own experience of gardening, my boulevard's about this wide. It's really narrow, but it's quite long. And in my experience, it's really fantastic to see how I've been able to meet my neighbors by boulevard gardening. It's super cool, because I also have a backyard garden, but when you're in your backyard, right? You don't really see, unless I see my neighbor behind and I peek over and I'm like, hey, how's it going? But I rarely even do that. Whereas when I'm on the boulevard, there's so many passerbys, and they stop and they chat with you about whatever, and so that can be a really fantastic way to build community, is by boulevard gardening, and it's a good way to get to know neighbors. And sometimes I just put my earphones in because I just want to garden and not talk to people. So that's also, I recognize that that's sometimes also where people are at. So today we are going to sheet mulch this boulevard. And so we've collected materials. Robin has collected all of these leaves from the neighborhood. Now is the best time to do sheet mulching, because the leaves are so abundantly available, and because you have the winter months, the wet, cool winter months, to have all these materials decompose and build soil. So basically, we're going to work with 3 ingredients today: cardboard, manure, and leaves. And those things are going to build us soil throughout the winter so that we can plant into it directly come spring. So that's the short story of what we're going to do. I'm just going to look at my little notes that I wrote down here. So sheet mulching is also referred to as lasagna gardening. It's also referred to as in situ composting. So basically what we're doing is we're building a compost pile on the place where we want to grow the plants next year. And the most important thing about composting, or I guess the intentions behind composting, is you want to breed microbes, and you want to create healthy soil. Those are the 2 things you want to do. You want to breed microbes and build healthy soil. And you do that by ensuring a balance of carbon and nitrogen. So the leaves are going to be our carbon material. The manure is going to be our nitrogen material. And when you have a balance of carbon and nitrogen in your compost pile or in your in situ compost pile, then the microbes will be happy, and the chemistry will also be happy. So there's biology and there's chemistry going on in a compost pile, and you want them both to work for you and to break down the components that you're adding to your compost pile to build soil. And so you need that balance of carbon and nitrogen. So similarly, if you had, an earth machine, one of those plastic compost bins, we sell them at the center. If you had that kind of bin, you'd be balancing the carbon and nitrogen by adding in your fruits and veggie scraps, say, from your kitchen, or your green yard waste, and then layering it in with leaves. So you'd have your fruits and veggie scraps, leaves, fruits and veggie scraps, leaves, and then you have carbon and nitrogen going on in that cycle to decompose and build compost with. And then you move that compost out, you spread it on your garden, and you carry on. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then there's a ton of reasons to compost, which I'll just rattle off here right now, just so that we understand why we're doing what we're doing. So in the case of doing a sheet mulch project here, so first of all, underneath this grass is the most precious soil that you have. So to dig up this sod would be really tragic, because we'd be ripping up the most precious topsoil that exists because of all the organic matter from the grass that's decomposing and breaking down, and the worms that are moving in the upper regions of the soil. And so if we were ripping off that sod and disposing of it some way, we'd be really losing a lot of the most precious soil, precious nutrients possible. So we're making our lives easier, but we're also making sure that the soil is healthier by just building on top of it. And so the cardboard really is going to act as our weed barrier. So we're going to lay down the cardboard to kill off the grass and keep the grass from growing through. Still, at some points, there'll probably be some, like here, you can tell, there'll be some work in the spring. There's a little bit of grass growing into the crack, and so there'll be some on the edges that might get away, and that'll be some maintenance to do in the first couple of years. But the cardboard really does a fantastic job of snuffing out the grass. Yeah.
Have you encountered, when there's, when they have like that plastic mesh underneath the sod that they lay down, and
Yeah.
it's like that plastic netting?
Yeah,
Do
like
you usually
landscape
dig
fabrics.
that out? No, it's not landscape
It's not?
fabric. It's kind of like a plastic, a thin
Oh.
mesh that like adds structure, I guess, to the
Like if you're
bottom
buying
of the
rolls of sod,
Yeah.
it just kind of
So
holds
I've had that before where
Plastic?
and it's
Yeah.
plastic, so I ended up just digging it all out because it was like there was just so much
Yeah.
like stringy.
That's such a
plastic
bummer. I'm
mesh.
sorry. Yes, I would definitely get that out of there.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to break down into little pieces of plastic and potentially end up in whatever you're growing.
Yeah.
And so in that case, if you were having to rip up the sod, then compost that sod. Or flip it, or
Just like shake as much of the dirt out of
Yeah,
it.
and then throw that sod into a compost pile. So try and keep those nutrients close. So I wouldn't take the sod off site. I would, shake off as much soil as you can, but then put the sod perhaps in a pile and let it decompose into soil that then you can replace. and put
Yeah.
on back
It was
later.
like it was like so
Sounds gnarly.
woven together that
Oh,
you couldn't
such
even
a
really
gnarly-
get
you
it
couldn't get the
apart.
plastic out.
Yeah. It's like a really fine net.
That is
almost.
such a
Yeah.
bummer. I'm so sad that they do that.
Yeah. And I didn't even know they did that, but apparently.
if you buy the rolls.
You buy the rolls of
Yeah,
sod.
it just
and
holds it together so it
And it's-
doesn't fall apart.
I think that they would use like jute or burlap or something,
Yeah.
Anyway.
That would be
It's really annoying that.
Yeah, I guess so. So yeah, ideally we're keeping the sod. We're keeping those nutritious bits of soil that are directly below the grass. And we're making our lives easier because we're not having to dig up the sod, right? That's actually a heck of a lot of work.
If you wanted to though, because I just did this last week, knowing that you don't have to, but I was just trying to speed up the process. I took my grass and I flipped it. I mean, it was a lot of work, but I was trying to get the worms up, and I was trying to get the grass
die.
smothered quicker.
Yeah, still I would say not ideal.
Not ideal.
But if you've done it, it's done, and so at least you're keeping that soil in place.
Yeah.
But you're still disturbing the soil in a significant way, and you're flipping soil horizons, which also isn't ideal.
Yeah.
So next time I'd say instead, like if you don't have the materials to sheet mulch with, put a tarp over your grass and let the grass die under the tarp.
Yeah.
That could be another way to kill
So
off
it
the
does
grass.
some damage. I mean, obviously I'm killing things because I'm slicing in half worms
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and the soil structure as well. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Diane.
Diane, welcome. We're just talking about sheet mulching and the benefits of it, and we're also filming. Thank you for the reminder. We're also filming for our online, a recording for our online audience. Are you okay with being on camera? Or would you prefer not to be? You okay? Okay, cool. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so so
layers.
soil structure is something that is often forgotten about, but it's basically like the little clods of soil that worms and microbes help to form.
Yeah.
And so when you have really good soil structure, there's going to be space for roots, there's going to be space for air, there's also going to be really good capillary action so that water can rise up through the soil horizons really easily. And when we dig or when we rototill, we're basically busting up that soil structure. So I like to use the analogy that like there's a whole bunch of little life, so microbes that we can't see with our eyes that exist in the soil, and they're working really hard to basically build a house in the soil. So picture the soil being like this really structurally sound house. And when we go through and dig it up, when we double dig or when we rototill, we're basically busting that whole house. We're breaking it all up, and then the microbes have to start again to build that house over again.
Yeah.
So, so ideally we keep it simple and we build up on top of the grass and try and snuff out the grass and build from there. There's And yeah, just to reiterate, likely the soil that you have already there is the best soil that you're going to have. And I always prefer to encourage people to build soil with organic matter like manures and like leaves rather than purchasing soil from one of the bigger soil producing soil marts, because those products tend not to be as dreamy as you think they're going to be. Like
Dead.
the organic soil blend, and then you grow in it, and it's usually pretty disappointing. They need a lot of amending. So I really encourage you to use these types of materials, and also they're free. Like, we sourced all these leaves for free. Yes, it took Robin a lot of labor to gather all these leaves. Yes, it took me labor to go and get that manure and bring it here and collect the cardboard. Yes, it takes labor, but it's all free, which is kind of great. And we're sort of cycling waste materials into something that's incredibly beneficial, right?
Closed loop. Yeah.
Closing the loop. So yeah, building a compost pile like this sheet mulching project that we'll do, an in situ compost pile, it'll help plants to grow well, it'll reduce soil erosion. This organic matter that we're adding is going to act like a sponge. It really holds onto water rather than the water running off. And we all know right now that it is very important to have really healthy soil to hold on to water, especially as we go forth into unpredictable times. We're landfilling less materials or recycling less materials, which require energy. When we build soil like this, or when we're making compost piles, we store carbon in that compost, and there is too much carbon in the atmosphere, clearly. And so by building really healthy soil, we can grow healthy plants, which suck carbon out of the atmosphere through photosynthesis and sink it into the ground. But also, this stuff has an incredible amount of stored carbon in it. And so when we keep it on the soil, and we're disturbing the soil less by building an in situ compost pile rather than digging down, because every time you dig down into the soil, you're releasing carbon into the atmosphere, actually. Small amounts, but amounts still. And so by building on top, we're actually going to store and keep that carbon in the soil. Yeah, and so by building this kind of compost pile, we're going to build soil structure, we're going to build soil fertility, and we'll also hopefully build some community resilience as people come together around this garden, around the library, have a place to sit, and talk about themes of building soil in times when we really need to be paying attention to how we're caring for the earth. Okay, and particularly with sheet mulching as a form of composting or building soil, it's a really fantastic tool for restoring depleted soils. So if we tried to dig a hole and plant some lettuce seeds in this soil here, those lettuce seeds might not do that well. But by building a whole bunch of adding a whole bunch of organic matter and building soil fertility, next year the hope is that those seeds will grow really well. We also can, with sheet mulching, mimic soil horizons, because as we dig down into the soil, there are different horizons that have different sort of realities and properties, so different chemical properties, different biological properties. Usually it's the top soil, right close to the top, and underneath the sod in this case, is the most nutrient dense and the most biologically active. And so by adding this kind of organic matter that we will today, we're going to draw in even more of that biological activity to the very top layer. Yeah, and it's growing pretty well.
Yeah.
But in the long term, it's not really going to change all that much.
I was trying to speed it up is what I was
Yes,
doing.
yeah, so you probably will speed it up for this year, but then, you still have to do the addition of all the organic matter over the course of time in order to really reap the constant benefits of having good soil.
Yeah.
And like you just said that you're new here, and where have you moved from, I wonder?
The mainland.
The mainland, okay, so
North
not that
East.
much different,
Yeah.
region, but I moved here from Ontario a number of years back, and I had done a lot of farming and gardening in Ontario, and the soil's totally different here. It's very shallow, it's very clay-based, and it's very acidic, which is very different from where I was farming and gardening before. So a reality of living in this landscape in this bioregion is that native plants grow extremely well because they don't need very many nutrients. But if we want to grow things like vegetables, we need to work on the soil for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We need to work on the soil for a long time. Yeah. So what we're going to do today, and we'll see how our materials go. We're probably not going to have enough manure to make a really thick layer, but we'll do a thin layer, and that'll be good. to start us off. And in the spring, perhaps Robin and I will do some more amending of the sheet mulch pile. But what we're going to do is we're going to lay down the cardboard to cover the grass, and then we're going to lay down the manure, and we'll thin it out so that every spot has some, and then we'll put the leaves on top. So that's what we're doing. We're just going to do 3 layers. If we had an extreme abundance of manure and we had an extreme abundance of leaves, then we could do an additional layer. So we could do cardboard, manure, leaves, manure, leaves, manure, leaves, manure, leaves until we're out of materials. So you're just making like a lasagna, right? Layering it in. You only need 1 layer of the weed barrier. But say you had fewer leaves and you had extra cardboard, you could sub in the cardboard for a carbon layer, but it'll just take a longer time to decompose than the leaves will.
Do you have any tricks for making the leaves not all blow away in the windstorm?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the only suggestion I have is some sort of mesh or like a whole bunch of boards and sticks and twigs, something to weigh it down, like something physical to actually weigh it down. I had, what was the, oh yeah, burlap sacks could be another one that allows the water through, but that can hold things down. Sometimes if you go to roasteries, you can just get a whole sack of sacks.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
So that's another idea. Yeah. Does anybody else have any ideas of what you could use to weigh down the leaves?
I personally just happen to have some framed trellises, so I just laid them on top.
Nice.
Then I'm going to want my framed trellises in the
Yeah.
summer. So
Yeah. But by that time, the leaves will probably be like
Yeah.
solid enough that they'll stay in place. Like they'll
Yeah.
be wet and decomposing enough that they'll stay in place.
yeah, or
Yeah.
tree branches or something.
Yeah.
To just lay on top.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed like that person has a whole bunch of branches there from their prunings. I wonder if even
Yeah.
we might want to use some of those, Robin, on top. We'll
I
see.
actually bought some of that orange
Okay.
mesh stuff.
Okay, great.
So, I
So we
don't
can
know
lay that down.
How it would, how much I have.
Yeah.
I wanted the orange. I could have gotten a cheaper one, but I didn't want somebody to trip on black.
Oh, yeah,
on
good point.
crossover.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So- and this has had a tarp over it to keep it from blowing away the last week. So,
Nice. Nice.
but anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on.
Okay, cardboard.
Yeah. Cardboard, manure, leaves. And so, the leaves have been stored here because it's a fantastic place to store the leaves right on the boulevard. But what we'll have to do is just move the leaves onto the road, and then we'll put down the cardboard underneath. And then eventually we'll do the manure, then we'll do the leaves. And
Can we do half and then half?
yeah,
Would
that's
that
a
be less
great idea.
moving?
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
The only thing, I guess we can estimate what half the manure is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that idea. Yeah, super idea. What questions do folks have before we get our gloves on and go for
I just had a
it?
question about wood chips.
Yeah,
Are wood chips part of this story?
could be.
Could be?
Yeah. Could be. So wood chips are really high in carbon, so they'll decompose a little bit slower than leaves because you can imagine like they have more of that hard cellulose that'll take longer to decompose. But wood chips are a fantastic addition to any landscape. If I was building gardens, say to grow vegetables in, I wouldn't be mulching with wood chips on top. I'd use the wood chips in my pathways. If I was doing a sheet mulch, then yeah, you could use some wood chips in a layer. It would attract. Wood chips are really good at attracting mycelium, so microbes that are fungi, and so they decompose those fungi that get attracted to the wood chips, decompose the wood chips into really great soil.
What about a finishing layer? Like it might also keep. So the area I'm thinking of sheet mulching
Yeah.
is an area of grass
Yeah.
that's on at the front of my house that has 3 Gary oak trees and it has just they grassed it, so it's been like that forever. So I want to return it to not grass. So I'm going to sheet mulch it to
Great.
get rid of the grass and
Great.
build the soil.
Yes.
And then put native plants. And I have lots of camas on the property and all that kind of
Super.
stuff, right?
Super.
So, but it's right by the front door, so I want it to also look. So I was thinking about finishing it with wood chips so that it would look sort of as a would you do that? Would that be okay?
Yeah, and then will you plant your native plants like in different little pockets of the wood chips? Is that what you're picturing?
Yeah, I would. I was going to create a path through it as well, so that it goes to our parking area, and then just put plants in, like do the whole thing, and then do the wood chips, and then just scrape away the thing and put
Yeah.
the plants in.
And what will your pathway be covered in?
It'd just be stepping stones.
Stepping stones. Cool. Yeah, I would say that could be a great idea. And if you were going to choose the type of wood chip, then I would suggest a hardwood chip because that's better for the soil. Whereas a coniferous chip like cedar chips or some other coniferous tree, they're antimicrobial, and so they sort of keep away all the beneficial microbes that you want to bring in. So something like alder chips are really common, and Souk soils, they deliver alder chips. You're going to find that the hardwood chips are more expensive, but they also look really pretty, the hardwood chips. I think they actually look pretty.
I also heard that you can just get, you can contact all the tree
Yeah,
companies and
totally.
just say,
Yep.
if you have a tree in my neighborhood you're taking down, and they'll just come and dump it free on your driveway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's
What
kind of
about
was kind of
the
my plan.
nitrogen? I've heard that it depletes the nitrogen if you use chips.
Yeah, so wood chips, they're really high in carbon, like I said, and when you're building soil or building a compost pile, there needs to be that balance, that equilibrium of the carbon and the nitrogen that I was talking about in the beginning. So if you covered your soil in wood chips, as those wood chips are attempting to decompose, yes, they will draw nitrogen up from the soil to try and reach equilibrium. So you're right. But since, tell me your name again?
Colette.
Colette is trying to grow native plants in that area, I'm not as concerned about it. I would not recommend it if she was saying that she was going to grow vegetables, because native plants are really, they're so resilient, and they're really good at growing in poor soils, actually, and in acidic soils and in less nitrogen-rich soils. So you're absolutely right, Robin, but in this scenario, I think that the wood chips could work
that's
well.
good.
And I would prefer the alder chips. And the only thing is, when you're calling the tree care companies, I would try and confirm what tree they're doing or what material. Because often they have ivy and holly and things that you really don't want to sprout in your garden. And then again, hardwood chips are a little bit more difficult to get from the tree care companies. But if you can, get somebody on the phone who's real nice, and we'll be like, yeah, we'll give you a call when we're doing pruning of a hardwood tree. It's great.
What about using seaweed?
Seaweed's a great addition to a sheet mulch pile or to a compost bin. It would be more on the nitrogen end of things, though it's not even that high in nitrogen. It's more full of micronutrients, which is of benefit to the soil for sure. But it's more on the nitrogen end of things. It's also often more wet, of course. So you can use seaweed. My only thing that I'll say is that be mindful of where you're harvesting from and how much you're harvesting, because the seaweed is very much a part of the ocean ecosystem, right? So while it blows in a storm, or it washes in a storm, it will equally wash out in a storm as well, and then keep that sort of ocean ecosystem healthy and well. So that's all I'll say about that, is just be mindful of.
Yeah, I first heard that you weren't allowed to take seaweed, but then I was researching moving here,
Yeah.
and they said you can take it with permission.
Oh.
But they didn't say with permission from whom, like from the city of Saanich or whatever, and they
Cool,
said
that's-
there's a limit of 100 pounds.
Interesting. Yeah, I've not seen that. I mean, my mind immediately goes to like what I've heard from Coast Salish people about ethical harvest and getting permission from a Coast Salish person before you harvest anything from anywhere. Like that is definitely, but I doubt that the city was writing that. Though that'd be great if they were writing that. Like you need permission from a Lekwungen person before
But they
you
were
take
vague.
from Willows
They just
Beach.
didn't say who
Yeah.
from, and
Yeah, so maybe a little bit more research needs to be done there. But that's kind of cool that they were asking, that they were requiring permission in some way, because I appreciate when people are just mindful about how they're harvesting things, right?
yeah, I'm just taking a small amount, and you're not supposed to rake it. You can
Right.
just like hand, like be very gentle when
Yeah.
you're taking it.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool. All right, shall we get to the sheet mulching bit? Happy to answer more questions as we go, but we'll start by pulling tape off of cardboard. That's important. So we'll pull tape off cardboard, and maybe Robin, if you have a little bucket or bin, we could put the tape in for garbage. That'd be great. And then we'll just lay the cardboard down on this end of the boulevard and making sure that we overlap it well.
I found that when the cardboard gets wet, the tape pulls off.
So
way
easy, right? So
easier.
that pile's gonna be easy to get the
I'll work
tape
on that
off. Yeah.
Yeah. So anything that's glossy, I try and stay away from.
And all this too?
Yeah, that cardboard as well. And there's some on the, did Robin say, I think there's some on the porch as well.
Yeah, so I try and stay away from anything that's glossy.
And anything that's waxy. But otherwise, like I know that newspaper, I've done a bunch of research on newspaper, and newspaper in BC mostly uses vegetable-based ink. So long again as it's not glossy, you're good to go. So I wonder if it's the same for cardboard, but I haven't explicitly done research on cardboard. So yeah, it's a good question. But,
And it doesn't matter about these little white labels and stuff.
I just pulled one off because it was easy, but they seem pretty papery to be honest.
Yeah.
And the way you can usually tell how if it's papery or plasticky is like when you rip it apart, if it doesn't have that sort of plasticky look to it, and it doesn't. So that's
I find people just get stuff like this out and I roll out with my pickup truck.
you can start, yeah, on the grass end of things for sure.
Especially around opening and stuff when they have gardeners.
Yeah, this stuff is really wet, huh?
Yeah.
Put them in a nice big pile and just drive around and grab them. Are we going all the way to the other side of the telephone pole? Or?
Ask Robin if that's all her property.
Tape is on here, you have to take it off. I didn't ever think to take it off when I put it out for recycling either, to be honest. Now I think I have to.
Robin, are we going all the way to the edge of the grass, or is that your neighbor's property?
Yeah, no, right to the right to the really big sheets of cardboard. Somebody said, I don't know what they like. They're like really big, or like appliance stores. Yeah. They're massive. Oh, right, good. There's always tons of people advertising free movies.
Yeah.
Good idea to do the half and then half. That was a fantastic idea. great way to use cardboard, huh? It's just otherwise getting recycled.
We're moving tomorrow into our house.
Oh, will you have a whole bunch of extra cardboard?
Yeah, but I did all my sheet mulch in the last few days.
Oh, shoot. Did you have enough?
Yeah, I went around everywhere.
And collected them.
This time is on recycle day.
Whoa! Look at that.
Recycle day.
You can just blanket it. That's so handy. Did you mostly just go around your neighborhood, Robin, on Recycle Day?
Well, I was actually going up.
You open them up,
Richmond
so you
Street, and
just-
there was so much
you don't do
cardboard, I said,
double?
I'm stopping to get it.
Right on. What's that?
You don't like do them like that, double?
Yeah,
You do one layer?
You can break them in half. Yeah, so just, yeah. You got it.
Oh, look at that, perfect spot for my dish. Put it in under a bit then.
Some cardboard that was.
So weird, right?
Massive. If we cover up this whole space here.
Wow. So if you were doing this in a different season, I would recommend like putting the sprinkler on the cardboard for a while to really moisten it. But since we're doing it in the rainy season and actually a lot of the cardboard's already wet, we're not going to do that. Because more rain is coming. Stuff is just like falling apart. It's so wet. I can't even really open it. I'm trying to open it to cover the crack.
Okay. Layers of cardboard or just one?
One is good, though I'm thinking this stuff is like, it's actually, it's for the corrugation. It's probably fine. I think one is fine. Yeah, these are great.
This is the sheet and sheet mulching.
Yeah, seriously, it's literally a piece of cardboard.
Wow. That was fast.
Those sheets help.
This all done?
done these ones already?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
We're just saving them for the other half of the boulevard too.
Right, yeah. Here, that'll just weigh it down and have that fall. Okay. Great work. So, if folks wanted to start spreading manure, we can do that. And we'll creep in down here and see what that gets us. Probably not going to go very far, but... And that seems like maybe a little bit more than half, huh?
Yeah.
So maybe we'll do 4 bins down that end. Feel comfortable having these breads? Sorry. So that was the manure that got a bit waterlogged. Not ideal.
Well, we can use the water.
Yeah, it's probably a bit anaerobic. When things get wet like that, they tend to go anaerobic. So it might be a bit extra stinky, but I didn't have a lid for that one. And it rained a lot the past couple weeks. So yeah, there's a bunch of shovels here. And forks will be handy, I think, too. And then we'll just spread the manure around. You might want to just shovel it out from me. It might be easier to shovel a couple.
I'll just try.
Yeah, so moist.
Good
Want
stuff.
to shovel?
Woo! How thick can they are?
Well, we'll have 4 bins of manure to work with, so why don't I?
Just 2 then for this. Well, maybe
We'll have
2 and a bit.
four
that
down this
stinks.
end.
Oh, okay.
4 down this end. So we'll get the other 2 dumped, or the other 3 dumped out, and then that'll help us decide how to do that.
Where did you get the manure from?
There's a farm just off interurban on Hector Road, and they want you to come and get their manure.
Okay.
One less thing for them to
Can
do.
you put those details in our email afterwards?
Sure, yeah, it's a good idea. And so sometimes you'll see like a little hole forming, and so you have abundant cardboard, you can just put another piece of cardboard on top to ensure that no grass is going to get through.
Can I use the rake? Is that okay?
Yeah. There's that cool mushroom.
If anybody knows what type of mushroom this is, feel free to email us with an ID. It's growing in that manure pile.
There's a little ditch here, just watch your ankle.
How thin can we make the
Well,
manure?
we're gonna need to make it pretty thin, and ideally we would have more. This is a huge boulevard,
Yeah.
and so I should have sourced more manure. So we'll just thin it out. Like that thick would be great if we could keep
Ideally,
but
yeah.
ideally, but we don't have
We
enough.
don't have
so
enough.
we'll thin it out.
Yeah.
And that in. Maybe we'll do one more. We'll do one more of the bins of manure. Somebody would like to help me carry one more over. We'll do two down here. We'll do two good full ones. Yeah, let's do this.
So maybe where your rake is here.
What if your manure layer's not very thick though?
It's okay. The leaves are still a fantastic bit of organic matter. So it'll just mean that there's less nitrogen in the compost pile. So in the spring, perhaps if the soil is seeming, you know what, we won't know until we plant the plants though. So, I mean, with native plants, I'm not too concerned about it. If I was wanting to grow veggies in it, I would probably amend the soil in the spring with an organic
What native
fertilizer.
plants? What are the native plants? What are you going to grow, Robbie?
Oh, well, there's quite a lot of different varieties, quite a lot of bulbs like camas and
Yeah.
Susan stars and stuff. I definitely want to have a ribes, red flower currant. And, but I don't want things to get too tall so we don't see it.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
able to see out. And, well, there's a lot, no trees. Yeah.
Yeah, you grow.
Everything huckleberry.
Oh yeah.
Are there any short, like dogwoods as well?
Yeah.
Yeah? Like understory things?
Yeah.
Because I have 3 Gary Oaks, which just almost completely shade that area.
Yeah.
There's those pink dogwoods.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how big they get though. I don't want to plant under trees. So I know they are understory, but I don't know how big they'll get. Just a bit of research.
I think it's still good.
Yeah, there's actually a student
Oh, yeah, okay.
They've just changed their name. They're called Saanich Native Plants.
Oh yeah, I've heard of them.
And
And we're gonna use like, you know, a bit more than half of this pile. So spread them on and we can make them thick. There's also some on the road there.
And there's a couple of other rakes over here. Good idea. Okay.
I mean the leaf part, that is.
Yeah.
so if you just had leaves on your garden and no other like nitrogen-rich amendments, it would just be kind of low nitrogen.
Yeah, leaves alone make a fantastic mulch, so you can just cover soil in leaves.
Yeah.
But as a soil building exercise, you really need something in the nitrogen family. So alternatives would be like coffee grounds. You could get a couple wheelbarrows of coffee grounds from your local cafe.
Okay.
You could use food scraps, but that tends to attract rodents a little bit too much, so I wouldn't recommend it for like a boulevard sheet mulch.
Yeah.
But the seaweed is in that nitrogen realm.
When I used to have my
I just
oak
had a
tree-
horrible interaction with our, like, the property behind us is getting developed, and they undercut our whole backyard, and like all our topsoil and our rose bushes fell in, and like all my compost bins crumbled into their pit, and they they just
just like don't understand.
Yeah.
Oh, that beautiful soil I'm working so hard to
Totally, that sucks.
When I had my oak tree, I used to just mow the oak leaves.
So if you had like an existing, like I put down a mulch of leaves on my veggie bed. Yeah. But if I found some manure, I could just like throw that in. Yeah. Just leave that.
And like I said, in the email that I sent you all, I'll send you the address of the, or at least the drop pins that I'm put them down.
Yeah, I didn't know. Where is this top? Oh no, it's this.
There's no dragging that.
Oh, wait. Well, I mean, I tried to pull it and I'm like, yeah, that's not it. I think it's too solid. Maybe.
Do you want that thrown on the pile?
Yeah, I'm just breaking out to the right.
So here we are in front of our finished giant sheet mulch project. And so over the course of the winter, as the rain falls, this will all decompose into soil that then can be planted into in the spring.
When would it be ready? Like March?
Yeah, I mean, you'll still probably see leaves in March, but if you dig down, it'll be plantable. Perhaps not for seeds at that point, but definitely for starts or transplants of divisions or whatever. Yeah. So I just want to say a big time thanks to all of you who did the actual labor and helped today. I have all your emails, but I'd like to maybe before I go just record your names just so I can remember them, because there's a bunch of people who signed up to come to the in-person workshop, but I'd rather stay in touch with the folks, or more closely with the folks who actually showed up. And there'll be opportunities to support with this particular garden and maybe another garden in the neighborhood in the future, so I'll be sure to give that shout out to you all. Thank you, Robin, so much for collecting all those leaves and all that cardboard. I only had a fraction of that. And thanks for the cookies. That's really sweet. Robin put out some cookies there for folks.
Highly exceptional.
Oh, good, good. We've already got the seal of approval on that.
Snickerdoodles.
A snickerdoodle is nice. So yeah, again, thank you all so much, and goodbye to the people who tuned in with the recording in the online world.